So these are the 5 Zen meditations. Zazen, which is seated meditation. Walking meditation, which is walking mindfully. Tea. Feeding fish, the koi and the koi ponds. And then quiet nature streaming. This practice of streaming is to sit in nature, like to sit in the forest, and to try to allow the mind to be quiet, and to allow all of your senses to just stream with nature, to not have separation. The way that a frog would sit on a stone in a river, just to sit and stream. Allow it in. Become more permeable, more transparent, to let things pass through us. Let it in. To become more porous. And so I love these activities though, because so you're sitting and doing nothing, you're walking quietly, doing nothing slowly, you're drinking tea, you're feeding fish, you're sitting in nature. They're all, quote, useless activities. If you think that going to Zen, you're going to get something out of it, now I carry a backpack around and I'm cool because I know some Zen things, then you're not understanding Zen. Zen is about taking things off and recognizing everything's already complete and whole just as it is. You don't need more. So, man is so busy trying to control nature and trying to control each other. In the process, we're destroying the planet, and as well as our ability to take in life at this moment. When we're constantly trying to control things, how much does this tea cost? You walk into a forest and it's like, okay, what kind of tree is that? I wonder if I could, a bird becomes a research project. You're climbing a mountain and it's, we could mine this mountain and take precious metals out of it. We see reality as something we can extract everything out of, instead of just finding our place within it, which is really about letting go. We also are blocking the flow of reality. We're blocking this permeability, this openness, this porousness. And what we're blocking it with is cell phones and apps and Googles and commerce and transportation and information, the constant need for stimulation. For those of you on Instagram, which I am as well, and I try to really observe my relationship to technology and social media, the addiction to the constant dopamine drip of stimulation. We need constant stimulation, and it's getting worse as a culture. We need more and more stimulation all the time. What this does is turns us into automatons, mechanical beings who need constant stimulation, constant pleasure. And in the process of doing that, we are becoming more mechanical and unable to see a lot of what I'm talking about, which is the moment as it is, as it exists, the miracle of the moment. Most people can't sit quiet for a few minutes. They have to go to their phones. They have to stimulate themselves. Tea can heal this. Zen art can heal this because it teaches us to slow down. It teaches us to be with the moment. I think probably the hardest thing for a human being to do, and if you don't meditate, then you can try this. Just to sit quiet, just sit and do nothing. Sit for 10 minutes, put a chair in the middle of the room, put your knees together, put your hands in your lap, do nothing for 10 minutes. It's incredibly difficult. And it's becoming more and more difficult culturally, socially, societally, because we live in a culture where we believe we have to be stimulated constantly. So with tea, you can heal it, especially if you brew it in this incredibly inconvenient way. So I brewed tea last night or 2 nights ago for a friend of mine who's an older man. And he said, well, why don't you just put the leaves in a mug and put it under your Keurig and push the button? He goes, this seems incredibly inconvenient. You've got to heat the water, prepare charcoal, and go get water from some stream up a mountain. That seems fucking crazy. And I said to him, well, I don't want it to be convenient. There's incredible value, there's the cliche, it's about the journey, not the destination. There's incredible value in traveling up the mountain to get the water and coming back. I'm changed by that experience. The tea tastes better. it's the experience of going into nature and preparing water this way, preparing tea this way. Not only does it make much better tea, but the experience itself is deeper and richer. Most of our lives are run by convenience. We expect everything to be fast and convenient and easy. But what happens when we're trying to hack our lives and hack everything is we lose the inability to enjoy the process. We're always trying to get somewhere. And like my parents or older people who I know who have organized their life around comfort and convenience, whenever anything is inconvenient, they get very annoyed. You get to the restaurant and you've got to wait for 10 minutes because whatever. That's very annoying. That's very inconvenient. They lose the ability for patience and for, we have this opportunity to be with each other right now and to chit chat or whatever, So doing things slow in an inconvenient way that cultivates patience also opens up a dimension of what now? What now? What now? Again, the miracle of the moment. Okay. We're getting through it. Thanks for sticking with me. We've got 2 more tenets, and I'll try to move through them quickly and conveniently so we can all go off to our next activity. This 5th tenet is, all the tenets echo each other, but this one is central a lot to art, and of course the theme of this is art, but it's also about a worldview that informs Zen art. And this is collaborating with nature. Man arises from nature and gets along most effectively by collaborating with nature, rather than trying to master it. Man's intellect is nothing compared to that of the world, and its way are our true ways. So the way of nature are our true ways. I had a friend once who I said, well, I feel like I need to connect more with nature, so I'm going to move to Telluride where I live, and I can spend a lot of time in nature. And he said, connect with nature? Just stick your finger in a flower pot. That's connecting with nature. And, I thought it was amusing, and I said, well, yeah, that's true in a way, but what we're missing isn't a connection to nature because we are nature. As Buddha likes to say in his talks, he says, if you ask a room of people, go put your hand on the closest nature or point to the nearest nature. Everybody looks around for a flower pot or a tree or something. Rarely do people first point to themselves. And what we've really lost is the feeling of the connection to nature, the feeling of the connection of ourselves to nature. And this is a fundamental disease of the mind, because man came up out of nature. Even if you want to talk about it in terms of evolution and science, man evolved out of nature, but we've lost the fundamental connection that we are fundamentally nature. As a result, we're constantly trying to control nature, and we're destroying the planet in the process. We are causing unimaginable ecological destruction, largely out of our need for more stuff, more things, more convenience, more technology, rather than simplifying our lives. And I think the more minimalist we are, the more we can appreciate the extraordinary beauty of life as it is, without extra stuff. Nature knows when to rest and when to move, when to sleep and wake, to have seasons, to be in a place within the cycles of life, when to withdraw and when to produce fruit or flowers. There's an unbelievable intelligence to nature, the way that it all does what it does. But it doesn't have to read an operating manual. It doesn't need to be instructed on the way to live. Nature has its own natural way. There's a beautiful saying in the Tao Te Ching, which is a Taoist book text, that says, man follows the earth follows heaven, heaven follows the Tao, and the Tao follows itself. So we are meant to follow nature. We can follow principles in nature, and through it learn how to live with wisdom and humility and balance. And when I talk more about Taoism, I'll talk more about that. I've written a lot in the seasonal tea clubs, and if you read a blog, I wrote an article called Nourishing Life. It talks a lot about what it means to follow nature. What does that mean for man to follow the earth? So in Western art, you see man and civilization and cities and as the center point, right? Most great Western art, or a lot of Western art, man is at the center. Even if you can feel the artist asserting themselves into the art form. Whereas in a lot of Eastern art, man is not the center. Nature, man is a tiny little ant, a little speck within the larger macrocosm of nature. Having this small human within the larger nature is right orientation. So we take a little of what we need and we give the rest back. So in, again, this comes out of our tradition. There's this concept in a lot of Native American traditions of the giveaway. And they say when you kill an animal, the animal is giving away. It's offering its life so that you can live. And it's considered a disease in certain indigenous belief systems if a person takes more than they need. And you think about that in like modern Western culture, it's considered a sign of success that you take more than you need. That's what it means to be a successful person in the world. Whereas in a lot of indigenous wisdom, because they realize we are part of the whole, if a person is taking more than they need, then they are forced to give away everything that they own to the rest of or it's destroyed. They have to destroy everything that they own. And then the rest of the tribe or the rest of the group has to remake it all from scratch. Remake the clothing, remake the items that they use. So they recognize where it all comes from and stop thinking from the avaricious mind, the mind that says more, I need more. Cultivating the capacity to recognize how little we need to be humans is an extraordinary gift, because it opens up the whole world. The whole earth is our home. And living from a perspective of needing more with greed and accumulation of things, there are a lot of Zen haikus, about, I'm going to gather up the wind and put it into my satchel and bring it with me down to the city. It's this idea of like, it's all impermanent. So like this idea of hoarding is crazy. And it causes problems. We buy machines and then we've got to get other machines to fix that machine or to clean it. And then you need a machine for that machine, and on and on and on it goes. Or you own a business and you need an app to track the other app that then tracks the other app to make sure that the thing, like, we complicate our lives in profound ways. So trying to simplify a bit and collaborate with nature. Nature goes in cycles. In the winter, all the leaves fall and it goes into a time of rest and stillness. And then there's a time of abundance and fullness. So, I think that is an important part of cultivating a life of wisdom. Here's a nice poem, a haiku from another Japanese writer, Gakoku. Above the mist veil, from time to time, the lake lifts a sail. So in this, it's an image. He was a painter as well, Gakoku, and there's a painting of a single sail lifted up on a lake in the mountains, surrounded by mountains. And the boat and the crew are naturally part of the scene, so much so that the lake is lifting the sail. It's not about people. The little boat in this painting is almost swallowed up by the massive body of water. but also that body of water is holding the boat up. It's buoying the boat up. And the wind could overturn the boat, but it's also the wind that pushes the sail along to its destination. So the wind and the boat and the wind and mist, they're all intimately part of a whole within this painting. So, again, what was lost in the Industrial Revolution? What did we lose in that process? When I grew up in the summers in Eastern Canada, inside of a bay, in a forest next to a bay where my parents lived. And, you'd see motorboats flying around, and it's more convenient. You can get places faster. But then you would see a sailboat come across. So peaceful, not disturbing the environment at all. At one with the wind and the water and the people in it. There was a certain stillness and tranquility. And if you've ever ridden in a sailboat versus a motorboat, in the sailboat, you notice so many things. You notice the clouds on the horizon, and you notice so much beauty around you. In the motorboat, it's fun because you can water ski, but you're ultimately, when you speed things up, you're cutting off a lot of what makes life so beautiful. And in that race to do things faster, you're not really collaborating with nature. So even the stars and the planets, they followed orbits and life cycles through the cosmos, and they reflect the same spiral arrangements that we find in plants and roses. If you look at the outside of a pineapple, it's a perfect Fibonacci spiral around a pineapple, as well as the double helix of human DNA, right? The shape of human DNA. Human beings are an expression or a breath of nature. And we see patterns in nature from, when you look at those pictures from the Hubble telescope of the spiraling arms of a universe, all the way down to, if you look at a rose, the way that a rose grows, on the stem of the rose, the leaves are at the perfect angle in a perfect spiral, the same spiral in the universe or in our DNA, or even the way a hawk flies above a field. It flies at a 40-degree angle in perfect spirals. And so, of course, there's a reason for that. From that angle, they can see the most, it's the best way to see what's going down in the field when they're hunting. On a rose, when the rose fills with water, the water spills over and it lands on the leaf, which then drops to the next leaf and the next leaf in a perfect spiral. It's the maximal way to absorb water and hydration for the plant. So there's an intelligent design in nature. And like I was saying, it's in our DNA. These patterns of connection exist all the way from the most micro cosmic scale all the way up to whole universes. So, creating harmony with nature, following nature, is a way to live in harmony with life. So, to recognize that we're part of a wholeness. And so there's a really wonderful passage that comes from the Dhammapada, which is an important Buddhist text. And it's, I think the original is in Pali, which is Sabha papasa aharanam kusalasa upi sampada sachita paryo dapanam etam buddhana sasanam. This saying, I just love the way that the language rolls off the tongue. It translates to perform wholesome actions, abstain from unwholesome actions, purify the mind. These are the teachings of the Buddha, or the Buddhas. So this idea of performing wholesome actions, abstaining from unwholesome actions, and purifying the mind, simplifying the mind. This is central to collaborating with nature. In some ways, the way to harmonize with nature, or to collaborate with nature, is to simplify the mind, to purify the mind, and to cultivate virtue or wholesome actions. I don't want to say virtue because people get tricky about that. I did a talk on virtue that's up on the website if you want to watch it. But It's really about performing wholesome actions to live a wholesome life. Okay, we've arrived at the last and final tenet. Thank you, everybody, for bearing with me. I hope you're gaining some insight from this talk. Have a sip of tea here. And this one is specifically about art. So Zen art has this characteristic quality that it can fuse delight in a visual work of art or written, knowledge of life and personal experience and intuitions into one creative event. So I'll read it again. Zen art has this characteristic quality that it can fuse delight in a visual work of art, knowledge of life and personal experience, and intuition into one creative event. So in some ways, when you're appreciating artwork, the question is, does it do all these things? Personal experience, intuition, knowledge of life, and delight in a visual work of art. These are the characteristic qualities of Zen art. And you can see them in calligraphy, you can see them in Zen painting, you can see them in ink and brush painting, you can see it in archery, you can see, the Zen and the Art of Archery is an extraordinary book. You can see it in tea ceremony. You can see it throughout all of the Zen arts, in haiku, in koans, which are wonderful. I'll talk about those in the second half of this talk. So, great art is open-ended. And what that means is that it leaves tons of room and tons of space for the person enjoying the art to arrive to the art with their own experience of life and to find hidden meaning and find interpretation that is unique to each of us individually. The participant gets so much more out of the art than was intended by the artist. That's a sign of kind of like high and low is not a Zen idea, but I'll call it high Zen art, is that the person enjoying the art gets more out of it than was maybe even intended by the artist. So it's open-ended. Great Zen art is open-ended, a bit like the Enso that we talked about in the beginning, right? It's open. It's open. It's allowed. It's a given space to breathe. So I want to say one more thing about the Enso, which is it represents enlightenment, strength, elegance, simplicity, the universe, mu, which is the concept of the void, the empty void, disciplined practice, perfection of the imperfect, the moment, and ichigo ichi. So again, this symbol of the Enso captures the whole aesthetic of Zen art. And I want to share just a last poem about that I think captures this idea and has all of those elements in it. Here's how it goes. It's related to tea. As she pours water from kettle to pot, her grinning face momentarily lit by a firefly. So you see this sweet young woman, the writer reflecting about her, or reflecting on her, the pine tree calligraphy, the resonant fragrance in the air, the light of the firefly, the allusion to nature or the eliciting of nature, the magic of nature, like a firefly lighting a person's face. All of these are transformed by art and by our imagination into a spiritually significant event. So it's a beautiful young woman in the darkness brewing tea, so she's showing the skill, knowledge of life and personal experience. She's showing a craft that's central, it's an everyday experience, and a little firefly is flying by and lighting up her face. Again, it's capturing all these different elements of Zen art. It's bringing in nature, collaboration with nature. This idea of the self flickering, the self is there in a moment because the light is reflected off the firefly, and then the self is gone when the firefly flies off, the self disappears into the darkness. So this short little poem, right, 3 lines long, captures all these beautiful elements of Zen art. And also it's just a moment in time. Just a moment that's captured by the artist of a person doing this sacred act. For them, it's a sacred, beautiful moment. And it comes and then it goes. So it's impermanent. So it captures the beauty of the experience. So this is my exploration of these first 6 tenets. And of course, they're all related to one another. And in the next talk, I'll go through the next 7 tenets. And then you can reflect on them as a whole and maybe refer back to some of the books that I'm just going to show you now. And maybe explore through writing or through painting or through tea some of the ideas of Zen art. And you might find that they imbue your life with a deeper appreciation for the moment, for your place in nature, your place in the world, and for your relationship to other people. And I've certainly found through exploring Zen art just so much enjoyment. And I try to bring these principles and the ideas into my relationship to tea, because they help really inform the type of tea that I'm brewing and sharing with other people. So I'm just going to show you a couple of texts that you can get if you want, or maybe look at on Kindle. And then I will open it up to any questions that you might have. So. First, I'm going to make a mess of them all over the floor. Okay. So just a couple that I want to mention. And again, you can email me if you can't see them clearly or something. This is a book called Zen and the Birds of Appetite. It's by Thomas Merton. Thomas Merton was an extraordinary Westerner, a bit like Alan Watts. In the 60s, a lot of people knew about him in the 60s and 70s, and he wrote a lot of essays on Asian concepts and ideas, and he was a Trappist monk. He was a Christian monk who shared a lot about Zen Buddhism, and he was dear friends with D.T. Suzuki, who, D.T. Suzuki brought Zen to the West, really. So this is one of my favorite books. He's written a lot of incredible books. But Zen, the Birds of Appetite. Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, D.T. Suzuki. Really extraordinary book. I've read this a number of times. It's wonderful. This is a really powerful book called The Three Pillars of Zen. For anyone seriously interested in Zen, this book is invaluable. It's really quite profound. This is a nice book called Wabi-Sabi for artists, designers, poets, and philosophers. And it's really about the quintessential Japanese aesthetic of, celebrating imperfection, impermanence, incompleteness, and the beauty of things that are modest and humble and unconventional. Really nice book. And I think they just published another book called another Wabi-Sabi or another book. I love this book. Zen and Tea, One Flavor. This is by Wuda, my teacher. Really wonderful book specifically on tea and about the transmission between a Zen master and their students. It's just a great book, especially if you're a tea lover. This is a book called The Way of Zen by Alan Watts. I think it's really a pretty comprehensive book on Zen written by a Westerner. The first time I read it, I was just like, I don't understand this book at all. And that's part of it. I'll leave it at that. Wind in the Pines. This is an incredible book. The title comes from a 16th century Zen poet who has a poem where he says, If asked the nature of Chanoyu or the Way of Tea, say it's the sound of wind-blown pines in a painting, which is just a wonderful poem. This is a great book, and it's quite deep and profound, and it's really about the way of tea that was developed in Japan in the 15th and 16th centuries. I'm going to skip that. The Mission of Art. This is by Alex Gray. You've probably, a lot of you, seen some of his kind of psychedelic art, and this is just a really profound book about what art is capable of for spiritual awakening and personal catharsis. This is a book called Living by Vow. Really an incredible book that unpacks a lot of Zen liturgy, and it goes through 8 essential Zen chants, or what do they call them? Yeah, chants or texts, 8 essential Zen texts. This is an incredibly beautiful book that really talks about what Zen is about. Okay, we're almost done. This is another book by D.T. Suzuki called Zen in Japanese Culture. This talks a lot about artwork, and I'm going to leave it at that. But if you like Suzuki's work, it's quite profound. And last but not least, this is a book called Steeped in History, The Art of Tea. It has a lot of really nice history of Japanese tea and how Japanese tea developed. And it goes all the way up through Europe in the West and how tea was cultivated and brought to the West. And it's the history of tea. It's really a wonderful book. There's another book called The History of Chinese Tea, which is a little bit more academic and another really nice resource for history, the history of tea. Okay. I think that's all I got for the moment. Thank you everyone so much for being here, and I hope you found this enriching and valuable and meaningful in one way or another. I hope I didn't ramble too much, and I want to open it up for any questions if anybody has anything they want to ask. And again, we will load this to the website in the next 4 or 5 days if you want to go back and listen to it, or if there's somebody else you think might be interested in it, you're welcome to explore it. Something you might notice is that I'm releasing videos on the Way of Tea purely from my own perspective, and I try as often as I can to cite wherever I'm taking ideas from. And right now, Zen, this talk about Zen is one of the pillars. So it's in the pillar of tradition, where we also talk about shamanism and Taoism and nature itself and Zen. Those are the traditions that we're really focused on in the Way of Tea. And yeah, that's it. Thank you everybody for coming so much. And again, if you have any questions, then feel free to ask now.
Is your volume on?
Yeah, it should be. I think they can unmute and ask if they want. I'm just going to sit here and stare at you guys until somebody asks me a question.
Could be asking in the chat.
Or don't. Actually, if it's a good talk on Zen, then there aren't any questions afterwards. All right.
Hi, I'm Katie. This was wonderful. I just wanted to thank you so much. And I have a simple logistical question, actually. How are you keeping your water warm in your teapot back there?
In this case, I'm using an infrared burner. But thank you for your question, Katie. We, at the best water you would use charcoal. And there are different types of charcoal, like Japanese white charcoal or charcoal from longan, the shells of longan fruits, or coconut husk. But of course, preparing water on charcoal is a whole thing. You can prepare water. I mean, there's lots of different heat sources, right? In this case, we have an infrared burner here, which we carry and sell. So Living Tea's got infrared burners if you need a way to keep your water warm. You could also use what's called an alcove stove or an alcove burner, where it's like a clay burner with a little candle inside, or not a candle, but a wick with denatured alcohol or something. And that would just be like a little flame that's underneath your kettle, keeping it hot. Again, you can find those on Living Tea's website if that's something you need. And charcoal is kind of your other option. So I hope that answered your question. Cool.
Just had a couple questions, and I was trying to join with the seasonal tea club yesterday, and I got through to the shipping address, and then it said, we do not ship to Ontario, Canada.
That's a mistake on the website, because we have a number of people in Canada who are members of the seasonal tea club. So would you mind shooting me a quick email and just reminding me, hey, I was the one who your name's Gary, right?
Yes.
Yeah, just say, hey, it's Gary. I was there in the chat, and I'm having problems with shipping. And that way, on Monday morning when we're back at work, we'll figure out what's going on and fix it for you. And then I'll email you and let you know once we've been able to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And you were talking about matcha tea, and that's something. Is there a good way to brew the matcha tea, or is there techniques behind it?
Yeah, sure. We're going to do a video on preparing matcha tea, but there are, in the Senke schools, like the Ura Senke school, matcha tea preparation can be quite complex and involved. I mean, there are many, many, many steps. Turn the lid of the netsume this way 4 times, and then lift this thing and put that down and fold the napkin, and it's quite involved. And so I've been kind of hesitant to make a video about that, because it's just hard to sort of teach. What I would recommend is get a chawan. We have some beautiful handmade chawans by a local artist here, as well as a whisk, a little bamboo whisk. And you're going to put the equivalent of 2 to 3 scoops. Matcha can be quite invigorating, so I would start with 1 scoop and see how you feel drinking it. You put 1 scoop into the chawan, into the bottom of your dry matcha bowl, and then you pour a little bit of water over it. And as you're pouring water, you can begin whisking. And you want to do two circular movements and then 2 scraping movements, almost like you have a talon. And so you're kind of mimicking the movements of a blender, right? So the circular whisking gets the water spinning with the matcha in it, and you want to fill it just a little bit of the way, maybe an inch. So you're spinning it, and then you're cutting it. And the cutting is what produces all the bubbles. And a really good quality matcha should produce a nice amount of bubbles on the surface. And the foam is part of what makes matcha so enjoyable, the flavored foam. So you're spinning and then cutting, spinning, cutting, spinning, cutting. And once you've got a nice amount of bubbles in the top, a good layer of foam, you can add some more water until it's about halfway or 2/3 of the way full, depending on how strong you want it. And then enjoy one nice warm cup of matcha. Generally with matcha, you want the water to be closer to like 165 to 170 degrees. You don't want it too hot, or else it'll burn the matcha and it will produce a very bitter tea. So that's my recommendation for preparing matcha. And that's, of course, a simplified way. But in the future, we will do some videos on maybe a slightly more advanced and then ultimately more complex. One more thing I want to say about that is I have two friends, Catherine Mills and Sarah Hayden, who have studied very formally in some of the different lineages of complex matcha ceremony, and I'm trying to get them to teach a class. I don't know if those of you who have noticed, but we now have an event calendar up on our website, and we have people who are ambassadors, tea ambassadors, who love tea and love sharing tea, and they're going to be teaching classes. So if you pay attention to that event calendar, you'll notice that more classes are popping up. And so you could come to one of those formal classes on matcha preparation with one of those two wonderful women once they're willing to do one. So, kind of stay tuned to the calendar and see what's happening over the next month or two, because we'll have a lot of wonderful classes that have to do with tea coming up.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Colin. That was awesome.
Yeah. Hey, Jeff. How's it going?
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Arrival, but this has nothing to do with Zen. But in the movie, the aliens communicate in this language that they figure out looks just like an enso, and they communicate in this very unusual circular language. And the whole premise of the movie is it can be read forward or backwards. And in the whole movie, everybody's thinking starts to change to be circular, that the concept of time is irrelevant, right? So every time I think of an enso, I think of that movie. So if you haven't seen it, you should definitely check it out, because it's actually really amazing. And you'll see what I mean. And the way that they show the languages, each one looks like an enso, but they all have unique patterns to them. So it's really cool. So
yeah, awesome. I have seen it, and I love that film.
Yeah.
But I was thinking maybe tonight I would watch a movie, and I saw it right when it came out, and that's a great recommendation because it's quite a profound movie. I think it is,
yeah.
It's most films that end up in theaters nowadays are not really worth our time and attention, but it's one of the really good ones. So yeah, awesome.
Thank you.
Hi, Colin. Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah. Hi, Richard.
Hi. So at the very beginning of your talk, you mentioned a book, I think, called Come and See for Yourself.
Yep.
It was the same as the saying that you were
Yeah. Eke passe go. Come and see. Yep.
Oh, Come and See. Okay. And that's the name of a book also?
Yeah, let me pull it up here because I can tell you the name of the author. I just want to make sure I get it right. That's right. It's Come and See for Yourself, The Buddhist Path to Happiness. And the author is Ayakema. So it's Ayya, and the last name Khema. Ayakema. Yeah, and that's a wonderful book. It was written in like 2004 by a Theravadan Buddhist monk.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Yep, my pleasure. All right, cool. Well, I hope everybody has a wonderful Sunday, a nice end to their weekend. And thank you all so much for coming. It's nice to see some new faces in here. And, you know, I hope you guys are enjoying great tea. And if you have any questions about tea or teaware or incense or anything that we offer, or good times to come visit us at the tea house up here, then feel free to reach out. We're here to hopefully be of service in whatever way we can and to support everybody out there so they can enjoy a wonderful life of tea. We've gained so much from it in our lives, and we hope to share it with as many people as we can. So thank you all so much for coming. And we'll see you next time. Go forth and multiply, as they say. All right.
Go on the video.
Yeah.